You just became king of one of Europe's most powerful kingdoms in 1252. You've got armies, castles, mountains of gold, and basically unlimited power to do whatever you want. So what's your move? Most medieval kings would immediately start conquering neighbors, crushing rebellions, and generally proving they're the biggest, baddest warrior on the block. Alfonso X of Castile? He started translating science books. I'm serious. While other kings were out there beheading people and burning villages, Alfonso was in his library arguing with scholars about whether the earth was the center of the universe. His nobles were furious. His own son eventually rebelled against him because, and this is genuinely what happened, Dad was spending too much time doing astronomy instead of, kinging. By the time Alfonso died, he'd lost his throne, his family had turned against him, and he died basically alone. But here's the twist. 750 years later, his astronomical tables are in museums, his legal codes influenced half the Western world, and Spanish is spoken by 500 million people, largely because of him. This is the story of history's biggest nerd, who happened to be a king, made decisions that were either brilliant or catastrophically stupid, depending on who you ask, and somehow changed the world while completely failing at his actual job. Buckle up, this gets messy.
Alfonso wasn't born to be a warrior king, and honestly, he never pretended to be. Born in 1221, he was the son of Fernando III of Castile, who was such a successful crusader king that the Catholic Church literally made him a saint, Saint Fernando. The man has a feast day. There are churches named after him. He was that good at medieval kinging. So naturally, everyone expected his son Alfonso to follow in Dad's footsteps, conquer stuff, convert Muslims, build impressive castles, die heroically in battle. Standard medieval resume. Instead, Alfonso took one look at all that and said, "Cool, but what if I learned Arabic and studied astronomy?" His father was probably like, "Son, you're supposed to be learning how to lead armies." And Alfonso's like, "I am leading something, father, an intellectual revolution." That's not intellectual revolution.
Now, to be fair to Alfonso, he grew up in the perfect place to become a massive nerd. Toledo was this insane cultural crossroads where Christian, Muslim, and Jewish scholars all lived and worked together. After the Christians conquered it from the Muslims, instead of doing the normal medieval thing, burning all the books and calling it a day, they kept everything. So you had this medieval city where a Christian monk, a Muslim scientist, and a Jewish philosopher could sit in the same room and argue about Aristotle. It was basically a medieval TED Talk, except everyone was actually qualified to be there. Young Alfonso loved it. While other princes were learning how to look menacing in armor, Alfonso was hanging out with scholars, learning languages, and getting really into astrology. Not the horoscope kind, the medieval kind, which was basically astronomy mixed with philosophy and a healthy dose of what if the stars control everything. His tutors taught him Latin, Arabic, and probably some Hebrew. He studied mathematics, science, history, law, and music. Basically, if there was a book about it, Alfonso wanted to read it. And if it wasn't in Spanish, well, that's a problem he'd fix later. When Alfonso's father died in 1252, Alfonso inherited the kingdom of Castile and León. He was 31 years old, which in medieval terms is solidly middle-aged. Time to prove himself. His nobles were excited. Finally, a new king. Time for wars, conquests, glory, and Alfonso, "Gentlemen, we're starting a book project." Nobles, "A what?" "A book project. We're going to translate every important work of science, philosophy, history, and law from Arabic, Hebrew, Greek, and Latin into Castilian Spanish." Nobles, "Your Majesty, should we maybe focus on, governing?" Alfonso, "We are governing. We're governing intellectually." This is the equivalent of becoming CEO of a Fortune 500 company and immediately announcing, "We're pivoting to educational YouTube videos." But here's the thing. Alfonso actually pulled it off. He established what's now called the School of Translators of Toledo, and it was genuinely revolutionary. He hired Christian, Muslim, and Jewish scholars to work together in the 1200s, during the Crusades. Let me emphasize this. While the rest of Europe was busy with the Crusades, literally killing each other over religious differences, Alfonso was running a multicultural startup where everyone collaborated on science and philosophy. It's like if during the Cold War, the US and Soviet Union decided to just work on a joint space program and chill out. Except Alfonso actually did it. They translated works on astronomy, medicine, mathematics, philosophy, law, history, games, magic. Alfonso was curious about everything, okay? And literature. Hundreds of books, maybe thousands. And here's the kicker. Alfonso insisted everything be translated into Spanish, Castilian Spanish, not Latin. This was radical. Latin was the language of learning, the language of the church, the language of important things. Writing scholarly works in the vernacular was like, imagine if Harvard announced all courses would now be taught in TikTok slang. That's how the establishment felt about it. But Alfonso didn't care. He wanted regular people, not just priests and scholars, to access knowledge. This decision, by the way, is a huge reason why Spanish became a global language. Alfonso made it legitimate, sophisticated, and official. Okay, so Alfonso wasn't just translating other people's work. He was creating his own. His masterpiece, the Alphonsine Tables. These were astronomical tables, basically detailed charts showing where planets, stars, and celestial bodies would be at any given time. Think of them as the medieval GPS for the universe. Alfonso gathered the best astronomers in his kingdom, Christians, Muslims, Jews, whoever was good at math, and said, calculate everything. And they did, for years. The result was the most accurate astronomical tables Europe had ever seen. They could predict eclipses, calculate planetary positions, track star movements, all the things you need if you're trying to navigate at sea or, understand how the universe works.
Here's the insane part. These tables remained the standard across Europe for over 300 years. 300 years! Columbus used them. Magellan used them. Copernicus referenced them. Astronomers across Europe relied on them until the 1600s. To put that in perspective, we're closer in time to Columbus than Columbus was to Alfonso. And Columbus was still using Alfonso's work. That's like if we were still using an iPhone 1 to navigate SpaceX rockets. Except, it would actually still work. Alfonso had created something so accurate, so comprehensive, so useful that it outlasted empires, outlived dynasties, and remained relevant through the entire age of exploration. Now, there's a probably fake but absolutely hilarious quote attributed to Alfonso. While working on these astronomical tables and studying Ptolemy's geocentric model, which said everything revolves around Earth in these super complicated orbits, Alfonso supposedly said, "If the Lord Almighty had consulted me before embarking on creation, I would have recommended something simpler." Basically, God, your universe design is overly complicated. Bad UI. I could have done better. Whether he actually said this or not, the fact that people believed he would say it tells you everything about Alfonso's personality. This man had the confidence to critique God's engineering decisions. His bishops were not amused. But here's where Alfonso's problems started. Medieval kingship had a very clear job description: lead armies, win battles, look intimidating, execute traitors occasionally for morale, make your enemies fear you. Alfonso's actual activities: reading, writing, stargazing, hosting interfaith scholarly debates, and composing songs about the Virgin Mary. His nobles were getting nervous. Sure, the astronomy stuff was nice, but where were the conquests? Where was the military glory? Your Majesty, they'd say, the Kingdom of Granada is right there. We could invade. I'm busy calculating the orbit of Venus. Your Majesty, Portugal is... Do you know how hard it is to predict eclipses? Your Majesty, please. While Alfonso was doing astronomy at night, during the day he was working on something even more impactful, Las Siete Partidas. This was a comprehensive legal code, and when I say comprehensive, I mean Alfonso tried to create laws for everything: criminal law, murder, theft, and fraud; civil law, contracts, property, inheritance; marriage and family law; church law, royal authority and governance; military codes, commercial regulations. It's like if someone combined the Constitution, the Bible, Robert's Rules of Order, and a self-help book about how to be a good person, then made it legally binding. But here's what made it revolutionary. Alfonso wrote it in Spanish, not Latin, Spanish. Before Alfonso, all official legal documents were in Latin. If you weren't educated, which meant basically everyone except clergy and nobles, you couldn't understand the laws that governed you. Alfonso said, "That's stupid. How can people follow laws they can't read?" So he wrote Las Siete Partidas in Castilian Spanish. Clear, accessible, detailed. It was basically medieval open-source law. Everyone could read it, understand it, reference it. Now here's where it gets wild. Las Siete Partidas influenced Spanish law for 600+ years. It was the foundation of Spain's legal system through the entire Spanish Empire. Which means, when Spain colonized Latin America, guess what legal system they brought? Yep, Alfonso's. So Mexican law, Argentine law, Chilean law, Colombian law, all influenced by a medieval nerd king who just wanted everyone to have access to clear legal codes. But wait, it gets weirder. When Spain colonized parts of North America, California, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Florida, Louisiana, they brought Alfonso's legal traditions with them. Which means, when these territories became part of the United States, some of Alfonso's legal concepts got incorporated into American law, especially in community property states. So if you live in California, Texas, or Louisiana, and you're dealing with community property laws in your marriage, you can thank, or blame, a 13th century Spanish king who really liked organizing information. Oh, and in his spare time, because apparently Alfonso had spare time, he wrote over 400 songs. The Cantigas de Santa Maria, Songs of Saint Mary. These were religious songs, miracles of the Virgin Mary set to music. Beautiful medieval poetry with actual musical notation, so we can still play them today. Why did he do this? Because Alfonso thought music, like knowledge, should be preserved and shared. The man was compulsive about documentation. If it existed, Alfonso wanted to write it down, organize it, and make sure future generations could access it. He was basically running a medieval Wikipedia, except he was also the king. So everything's going pretty well for Alfonso. He's translating books, writing laws, doing astronomy, composing songs, living his best medieval intellectual life. And then he makes the decision that ruins everything. In 1256, the position of Holy Roman Emperor becomes available. This was basically the most prestigious title in medieval Europe. You were theoretically the successor to the Roman emperors, the big boss of Christendom, at least in theory. Alfonso had a claim to it through his mother, who was from the Hohenstaufen dynasty. So Alfonso thought, you know what would be cool? If I was Holy Roman Emperor. His advisors, Your Majesty, that's a terrible idea. Alfonso, why? Because it's insanely expensive, politically complicated, requires constant travel to Germany, and you'll probably never actually get it. Alfonso, but imagine the prestige. Your Majesty, imagine the prestige.
Alfonso spent the next 20 years, from 1256 to 1275, campaigning to become Holy Roman Emperor. 20 years! He spent enormous amounts of money bribing German princes. He traveled to meet electors. He wrote letters, made promises, formed alliances. He poured the kingdom's treasury into this campaign. And he never got it. The position went to Rudolf I of Habsburg in 1273, and Alfonso was left with nothing except a massive debt and a kingdom he'd been ignoring for 2 decades. His nobles were furious. "We told you this was a bad idea." Meanwhile, Castile's borders were being attacked, the economy was suffering, and Alfonso was still writing letters to German princes asking them to reconsider. It's like watching someone pour their life savings into a timeshare presentation while their house is on fire.
While Alfonso was obsessing over becoming Holy Roman Emperor, he was also supposed to be continuing the Reconquista, the centuries-long campaign to reconquer Spain from the Muslims. His father, Saint Fernando, had conquered huge territories. Everyone expected Alfonso to continue. But Alfonso was distracted. There were some military campaigns, sure, but nothing spectacular. And every time someone suggested a major offensive, Alfonso was like, "Can't right now, busy with my Holy Roman Emperor thing." The nobles were ready to fight, the armies were prepared, the momentum was there. But the king was in his study, writing astronomical treatises. In 1275, everything fell apart. Alfonso's eldest son and heir, Fernando de la Cerda, died unexpectedly. This was devastating personally, but it also created a massive succession problem. Fernando had 2 young sons, Alfonso's grandsons. By the law of primogeniture and Alfonso's own legal codes, the throne should pass to Fernando's eldest son when Alfonso died. But Alfonso's second son, Sancho, was like, "Hold up, I'm alive, I'm an adult, I'm ready to rule. Why should the throne go to a child?" Alfonso, because that's how inheritance law works. I literally wrote about this in Las Siete Partidas. Sancho, okay, but counterpoint, I should be king. Sancho didn't just disagree with his father, he rebelled. He gathered the nobles, who were already furious about the Holy Roman Emperor debacle, the wasted money, the stalled Reconquista, and the fact that their king spent more time with books than with them. Sancho said, "My father is unfit to rule. He's bankrupted the kingdom chasing a fantasy. He's neglected our borders. He's more interested in astronomy than governance. I'm taking over." And the nobles said, "You know what? Valid points." In 1282, Sancho effectively seized power. He called a Cortes, a parliament, and got himself declared heir, overriding his father's wishes. Alfonso tried to fight back, but he had no support. The nobles backed Sancho. The people backed Sancho. Even the church was like, yeah, Sancho is probably the better choice here. Alfonso, furious and heartbroken, did something medieval and dramatic. He allegedly cursed his son. Not like, "I'm disappointed in you," but like full medieval "may God strike you down" cursing. He disinherited Sancho, declared him a traitor, and even reached out to enemies of Castile, including Muslim kingdoms, asking them to help him fight his own son. It didn't work. Nobody helped him. Everyone had moved on to Team Sancho. Alfonso died on April 4, 1284, in Seville. He was 62 years old. He died largely abandoned by his court. His son had taken his throne. His nobles had turned on him. His grand imperial ambitions had failed. In his final days, he was basically alone with his books, the only things that had never betrayed him. His last words were reportedly, "I have been deceived." Sancho IV took the throne and ruled for 11 years. History remembers him as Sancho the Brave. Alfonso got the Wise, which sounds nice until you realize it's medieval code for smart guy who sucked at actual ruling. So here's the question. Was Sancho right? Was Alfonso a failure? In the short term, absolutely.
Alfonso lost his throne, died alone, and left his kingdom in political chaos. As a practical king, he failed pretty spectacularly. But here's what happened next. Alfonso's astronomical tables, used for 300+ years. They enabled the age of exploration. They helped discover new continents. Las Siete Partidas became the foundation of Spanish law, influenced all of Latin America, and even shaped parts of American legal code. It's still studied in law schools today. The translations preserved crucial scientific and philosophical knowledge that would have been lost. They helped spark the Renaissance, making Spanish an official language. Spanish is now spoken by 500 million people and is the second most spoken language on Earth. The cantigas still performed today, beautiful medieval music that survived 750 years. Sancho the Brave, his reign was fine. He fought some wars, he did normal king stuff. He's a footnote in history. Alfonso the Wise changed the course of Western civilization. So, was Alfonso actually wise? He made catastrophically bad political decisions. He neglected practical governance. He wasted money on an imperial fantasy. He lost his family and his throne. But he also understood something most medieval kings didn't. Knowledge is power. Not just military power or political power, but lasting power that transcends kingdoms and dynasties. Every conqueror king Alfonso was competing with, dead. Their kingdoms, gone. Their castles, ruins. Alfonso's books, still in libraries, still referenced, still influencing the world. He bet on the long game. He just didn't survive long enough to see he'd won. So what do we make of Alfonso X? Was he a visionary genius ahead of his time, or a delusional nerd who ignored his actual job? Honestly, both. He proved that sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is write things down, preserve knowledge, and trust that future generations will appreciate it, even if your contemporaries think you're insane. Alfonso chose books over swords, and 750 years later, we're still reading his books, but nobody remembers Sancho's battles. Maybe he was wiser than anyone gave him credit for. If you enjoyed this story of medieval kings who everyone got wrong, hit that subscribe button. We're covering more forgotten rulers who changed history in ways nobody expected. Next time, we're talking about a queen who ruled 3 kingdoms, crushed rebellions, and somehow ended up as a saint. Drop a comment. Which underrated medieval monarch should we cover next? Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the nerds win. It just takes a few centuries.